Uh, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our Missing Audiences in Northern Ireland webinar today. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Moran Ramon. I'm the Client and Communications Manager at Thrive. I have long dark hair with a short fringe, and I'm wearing glasses with a black frame and a cream and black dress. Before we start, I want to give you a bit of a background for the Missing Audiences survey in Northern Ireland. We partnered with the Insights Alliance, who are here today, and they will be presenting the result to you in a few minutes. So we've partnered with them to deliver the Missing Audiences survey in Northern Ireland at a time of reopening and optimism. And almost a year since the last time we ran Thrive's on audience research, Culture Beyond COVID. One second. Here I am, sorry. So with Missing Audiences, we wanted Northern Ireland organizations to get the same insights into audience behaviors and be able to compare them with the rest of the UK. We also heard from a lot of organizations here who have been struggling to bring their regular attendees back into their venues since last May when restrictions eased. So why is that? And what can Northern Ireland organizations do to motivate their audiences to come back? The insights that we will share in this webinar don't depict a particularly positive picture. They show there is a strong hesitancy around COVID and some people's priorities have changed. But these insights are incredibly important to take into consideration when thinking about what to do next and where to focus your efforts for welcoming missing audiences back into your space. So we'll now present the results. We have here Katy and Carr from Indigo Ltd, Robin Cantrill-Fenwick from Baker Richards, and Chris Unitt from One Further. So Flo, if you want to start.
Hello, I think it's me to start off with. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Katy Rains. I'm CEO of Indigo. I'm a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a flowery top. We're really pleased to be working with Thrive on this. So welcome everyone to this presentation of the Insights Alliance's new Missing Audiences survey, covering research undertaken in September and October this year. If this is your first Insights Alliance presentation, a particular welcome to you. We are Indigo, One Further and Baker Richards, and we've been working together to gather and share data from audiences to inform the recovery and reimagination of the sector. That's what we're doing here today. So thanks for being here. And we've been doing this for the past 16 months, starting with After the Interval, which was created by Indigo, and then Culture Restart, which is where the Alliance has been working together since then. Just to say up front, we will of course share the slides and a recording afterwards. So basically, we, as many of you will have taken part in After the Interval and possibly Act 2, we then launched the Culture Restart Toolkit with the Insights Alliance. And as I said, we've been measuring this, but a lot of the work we've been doing has been talking to people who have been attending events, organisations emailing their past databases, and people who've been engaging with digital content. And the missing piece of the jigsaw really was what about all the audiences who haven't returned yet? And so this Missing Audiences insight is really looking at the people who haven't yet been back, and particularly those who haven't got a booking in the diary either, to try and understand why they haven't been back. So why have they not returned? These are the 5 questions we're going to answer today. If they're not returning, what are they doing? What have they been doing? What do they feel happy to do? And have they been substituting their in-person experiences with digital? So have they been consuming digital instead? How are they feeling about coming back? And how important and what part do COVID safety measures still play? So I'm going to hand over firstly to Flo from Indigo, who's going to talk you through some of the results.
Hi everyone, I'm Flo. I'm a white woman in my early 30s with blonde hair and a flowery top as well. So I'm going to just show you first that these were the kind of top level numbers for the Missing Audiences survey as a whole. we received nearly 11,000 responses during a 6-week period in September and October, and had 50 different participating organisations. For Northern Ireland, this was just under 1,000 responses through 7 participating organisations, and this is the data that we're going to be showing you today. So we asked organisations, if possible, to target people who hadn't yet returned to them, because we thought this would be the best way to find out both why some people weren't returning to the organisations they'd previously attended frequently, and whether it was just that they weren't going back to that particular organisation, or whether they weren't returning to anyone at all. The survey was sent out primarily by theatres and performing arts organisations, but we also had visitor attractions and museums in the mix as well, just so you've got the context of who was responding. So having said that we were aiming to target people who hadn't returned, we did reach a number of people who had returned to the organisation who sent them the survey. So what you can see here is that 21% of Northern Ireland respondents said they had attended the organisation that had sent them the survey. So it may be that they'd been coming along with someone else who wasn't the lead booker. Then in the lighter blue, you can see there are a further 21% who had attended elsewhere, 15% who'd not attended but had a future booking, and just over 2/5, that bright pink 42% in the Northern Ireland line, who had not yet returned to anything and had no bookings in the diary. So we're looking at a very large chunk of previously loyal attenders who are yet to return to anything. We wanted to understand a little bit more detail about how the respondents from Northern Ireland broke down into different groups based on what they were doing at the moment. So the brilliant team at Baker Richards created this segmentation model, which we're going to show you. So you can see it's broken down into attenders and non-attenders. So those were those blue bits and the pink bits that you saw on the previous slide. And we've grouped them into different types of attenders. So there are 3 different attender groups and 2 non-attenders. So I'm just going to talk you through them, but broadly the attenders are at around 43% in Northern Ireland and the non-attenders at 57%. So the most confident group are this confident returners. They make up just under 1/5 of responses, 17%, and mostly these people are behaving as they were pre-COVID, and programming is the main reason they haven't yet returned. If they haven't yet returned, but generally they are returning. The cautious returners is the next group at about 11%, who are attending less frequently than they were before, and safety measures are still very important to them. We've then got a group of people who are attending, but not to theatre. So they're more likely to be going to outdoor venues, museums and heritage sites. So they're avoiding kind of being trapped in the sort of seated environment of a theatre, feel a bit more comfortable in places where they can move about and stay outdoors. Then in the non-attender group, we've got people who have made plans to attend, 15%. So they've not yet attended, but they've bought some tickets for something in the future. And the holding out group, which is a very large chunk, again at 42%, who've not returned to any cultural venue and have no plans to buy tickets yet. You can also see this arrow showing that for the left-hand side group, the key issues for non-attendance, particularly at the organisation who sent them the survey, is about programming. There hasn't been something they've wanted to come back to yet, whilst at the other end, COVID is the main reason holding people back from booking. We'll go into more detail on that shortly. A few things to keep in mind on our sample. It was sent to previous attenders. So we've got a sample which is a little bit more aligned to a kind of typical cultural audience than the general population. But even so, it's worth saying that across all segments, it does skew older. 80% are over 45, also retired, and these are really frequent core attenders. 60% used to come 4 or more times a year. So it's worth remembering that this is a core audience of cultural organisations. There are other audience groups out there that we haven't reached with this survey, and I think Katy will touch on them towards the end of the webinar. So question 1, why have some audiences not yet returned? So we asked those who had returned to something, but not to the organisation who sent them the survey, why that was, giving them a series of options to choose from. What you can see here is the top 3 options which came out most strongly, which were that there hasn't been something I've wanted to see, I'm avoiding interacting with crowds of people, and the venue hasn't been open long enough for me to attend. For the confident returners, so those people who are really happily going to stuff, it was all about programme. There just hadn't been something they'd wanted to see at the venue. For the cautious returners, that was still the key thing, but you can see there's a big difference for them. Avoiding crowds of people is a key reason as well. And for those who are not coming back to theatres, you can see that programme and COVID reasons are kind of coming out equally strongly. And overall, we can see that in these segments who are returning, if they haven't been back to the organisation who sent them the survey, just simply programme is the reason why they haven't been back yet. There hasn't been something on that they've wanted to see. So things get a little bit more interesting when we look at those people who haven't returned to anything and ask them why that was. Again, we gave them the same series of options to choose from, and these were the top 3 that came out. So they're avoiding interacting with crowds of people. They're concerned that other people won't comply with the COVID safety measures. And again, there hasn't been something that they've wanted to see. So that programming one. So for those who have not attended yet, but had booked, avoiding interacting with crowds was the main reason, but programming was also key for this segment, with almost the same proportion saying there hadn't been anything they wanted to see. For those who were holding out and not attending at all, avoiding crowds of people was the main reason at nearly 40%, with concerns about other audience members not complying with COVID measures also coming up quite highly. And this is how that looks across those 2 segments. We also asked all respondents how they were feeling generally about booking or planning a visit. So what I'm showing here is just the responses from the holding out group, those people who haven't yet attended or booked anything, to try to sort of get to the heart of what's going on with them. How are they feeling about it all? Why aren't they coming back? And what we can see is, perhaps encouragingly, nearly a quarter say they would return if there was something they wanted to see. So it's just about great programming and excellent marketing to entice them back, which is obviously very easy to do. Well done, everyone. However, the majority is that pink 56% who are just simply waiting until the risk is lower than it is now. And I think this is the real issue which we're going to be talking about today, and which is something that organisations don't necessarily have much power to influence. So you've got about 75% of this segment, which equates to around 30% of the overall respondents, basically saying they're waiting until the risk is lower, they can attend as they used to, or they're simply not planning to book at all. So the second question, if they're not returning, what have they been doing? We wanted to know, for example, whether those people who are not attending venues were also less likely to be doing social and leisure activities like going to restaurants, using public transport, seeing friends and family, that kind of thing. So we gave a really good range of different options and asked respondents whether they had been doing them a lot, a little, or not at all. And what we're looking at here is the non-attenders and the 4 activities that they've been doing the most of, which are seeing friends and family outdoors or in their houses, and eating and drinking in pubs, restaurants, or bars, both inside and outside. So we can see that 89% of non-returners have been seeing friends and family outdoors, with slightly fewer seeing them indoors. 73% have been going to restaurants outdoors and 77% indoors. But in these cases, it is worth noting that we can see that the proportion saying that they're doing this a lot is quite small. So it's the kind of that big chunk who are kind of going, yep, I'm doing that a bit, but not lots. If you compare that to those who are attending cultural venues, they've been doing the same top 4 things, but just more often, with indoor activities being more common. You can see that there's less of a distinction between the top 2 options. They're seeing friends and family indoors and outdoors equally. And compared to those not attending, respondents who said they were eating or drinking indoors is up from 9% doing it a lot up to 19%. And that's 92% of people overall. And in fact, whether or not respondents said they were eating or drinking indoors and how often is the thing that kind of maps quite neatly onto our 5 segments. And you can see that the confident returners are really leading the return to the pre-COVID normal behaviour, and the less confident segments are more likely to be doing this only a little bit, if at all. So the third question we wanted to ask was about what part digital continues to play. So I'm going to hand over to Chris Unitt from One Further to talk us through this.
Hi everyone. So yes, my name is Chris Unitt. I'm the founder of One Further. We're a digital analytics and strategy agency. I'm a white man in my early 40s, short dark hair, and I'm wearing a dark grey shirt. So yes, one of the questions we were asked an awful lot is digital activity just a stopgap for people who are unable or unwilling to attend at the moment? And the answer that we got back from the surveys was partly, but certainly not only. So the first thing we've got here is asking people if they had engaged with culture online since venues had reopened. And we can see that it's the cautious returners and not to theatres segment who are most likely to have engaged with culture online, which we might explain that and by speculating that these are the people who just want to keep their hand in some way. The numbers 4 and 5 that are not attended segments are the ones least likely to have engaged online, which for them, I mean, we might think that for them that the art going to theatres and arts venues is something that they'll do as part of a social experience and for other reasons beyond just the art itself. And that's not really something that digital platforms have really done very well, that community experience, or they're maybe just not that interested in attending arts events, full stop. So we asked people who have engaged online whether they are doing that as a substitute for attending in person. And this, the results we got kind of tallied with what we were expecting here. The happier people are to return to venues, the less likely they are to say that they're getting their culture fix as a online as a direct substitute for the in real life section. We can also see the substitution effect isn't the only reason for accessing culture online. We've got our chunk of back to normals who've engaged online since venues reopened, who are clearly doing so for other reasons. And then finally, we asked people who had accessed culture online if they're planning to keep on doing so in the future. And the results here, the vast majority, so between sort of 70–80% across the board, in our first 4 segments, agreeing strongly or agreeing that they would continue to be interested in some sort of hybrid offering of experiencing art in a venue and online. We've got our hardcore non-attenders at the bottom there who are the exception, possibly reinforcing this idea that they're actually just not all that bothered about cultural offerings anyway. But still within that, there's still a good chunk of people who are interested in further online offers. So if you're looking at these kinds of numbers, sorry, if you're looking at these kinds of numbers, I think one of the things to think about is this kind of interest from your audience enough to sustain a program of digital activity? Depending on the kind of things you're offering and how the economics stack up for you, you might have different takes on that. But something that we've been keen to repeat through all the studies that we've been doing over the last little while is that for digital activity to be successful beyond just a community engagement exercise, it really needs to reach out beyond your core audience of people who visit your physical venues. We've been looking at as well as looking at the demand, we're looking at the circumstances that that we're in at the moment, and it's been really interesting to see which kind of digital offers are continuing on from this point. So it is quite a big, quite a different landscape. There are organisations who are taking their digital offering that bit more seriously. So Mac Belfast, for example, their watch and listen section, it's in their navigation. It's between their what's on section and their your visit section. It's very prominent, putting that archive there. We're also quite interested in what Accidental Theatre have been doing with their archive of previous offers that you can watch again, the podcast that you can listen to, but then also the live offering that that they've got there as well, and also some interactive things which I haven't seen in many places. Being interested to see what they're doing there. And also one of the things that we've been talking to people a lot talking about with people quite a lot is this idea that theatre in particular is about pointing a camera at a stage and recording a performance and putting it online. And I'm always at pains to point to the people like Big Telly with productions like Incognito and the others that they've done, which show that actually a theatrical or an artistic experience doesn't necessarily have to be tethered to a stage in a venue, and that you can do things in a slightly different kind of way. So so there are some examples of people who are doing interesting things here. We are seeing, and there's been some research from the University of Kent that has talked about there being a digital divide, and that there being organisations that have the knowledge and resource to take advantage of this digital opportunity right now, and that they are pressing on and making what they can of it, whereas everyone else is starting to fall by the wayside and just go back to what they've been doing before. So I think that's something for you to bear in mind when you're thinking about what kind of ongoing digital offer you might consider. I'm going to pass over to Robin from Baker Richards for the next section.
Thanks so much, Chris. So hello, my name is Robin Cantrill-Fenwick. I'm the Chief Executive of Baker Richards. I am a white man in my 40s with rapidly receding brown hair and brown glasses. And I'm going to take us through this question of how the segments are feeling about coming back or not coming back in person. So let's take a look at the data on that. So on this chart, we asked people, as things stand today, in the next 12 months, do you expect to attend cultural events and venues in person more or less often than before COVID? So the dark green bars on the left-hand side are people who would attend much more often. The dark red on the right-hand side are people who would attend much less often, and grey is about the same. So looking at the total first, that first bar up at the top, we've got just over half of all of the respondents saying that they plan to come back less often or much less often. And as we move down through the segments, you can see how the reluctance is distributed, how it grows as we move down through those segments. But in total, we're looking at 20% of respondents who say they expect to attend much less often. And given that that's a majority of our respondents were previously very frequent attenders, there's a noticeably large loss of future volume there that potentially needs to be replaced by increasing the frequency of other bookers or attracting new bookers. When we asked all of the segments whether they have made bookings for any cultural events in the future, a majority of the first two segments, so those who have already attended, have already come back, also have another future booking. So they seem to be getting back into the habit of regular attendance. In the middle, though, those who have come back to something but not yet to theatres are still in the main very reluctant to book ahead. We've got 62% there who haven't got a future booking. And as has been mentioned, there's a segment there that's reluctant to return to indoor seated crowded spaces. Obviously, all of our have made plans to attend segment have made plans to attend. We see that on row 4, and none of the holding outs have got plans to attend just yet. So let's zoom in on the holding outs, because that is 42% of all of our respondents. And we asked them to rank what they would consider first when thinking about making a booking. So actually, as we've indicated already, the performance of the programme pipped COVID safety measures at the post. So the performance of the programme is the prime factor in influencing booking for this segment. This reinforces what we're seeing in England, for example, that what you might think of as kind of classic safe bet programming for your audience, whatever that means for your audience, helps to get people back into the habit of attending. So in theatre, that might be musical theatre or name-led casting for the most part. In concert halls, it might be well-known or highly thematic repertoire. Basically, with lots of things being uncertain, attenders appear to want to be as confident and reassured as they can be that the performance itself is going to be dependably enjoyable. So entertainment really does generally seem to be what people are prioritizing at this moment in time. Let's move on to talk about those COVID safety measures, though, where the data is really clear, as it has often been before in our surveys. And unlike in England, where a lot of the industry is at odds with this data, in Northern Ireland, there's more alignment, given that mask wearing is a requirement and Stormont is bringing in COVID passports from the 13th of December. So, of course, the timing of that just before Christmas is not great, but I hope we can provide you some reassurances about how your audiences will engage with that. So, let's start with a question that we asked about the prospect of removing all restrictions and the venue operating as it was pre-COVID. And the red bars show the proportion of respondents who would be less likely to attend if the venue were operated with all restrictions removed. So starting from the top, removing all restrictions would still be a turn-off for 55% of the audiences who are our so-called confident returners. So for the majority of even that segment, some safety measures are part of the mix of helping them come back to those normal levels of attendance or pre-COVID levels of attendance. In the green on the first row, just 20% of that most confident segment say that they would be more likely to attend if all restrictions were removed. So for most respondents, the headline is these big red bars. Loosening restrictions makes most respondents, whether they've come back yet or not, less likely to book in future. So establishing and enforcing some COVID safety measures is a net positive action, meaning that safety measures improve access. And this has been the case throughout all of our research to date. It remains the case now. So with Northern Ireland, with its planned restrictions, is actually in a really good place when compared to some of the other nations in the UK. We went on to ask about being asked to show those vaccine passports, which are coming in soon, or evidence of a recent negative test as a condition of entry. So full transparency, we didn't include proof of a positive test in the last 30 to 180 days in this question, which will be part of the Northern Irish standard, but we have no reason to believe that that would have shifted these numbers very significantly. So it's really striking that here again, respondents have told us that vaccine or test passports are a net positive. From an access perspective, they encourage substantially more people than they deter. And while they do pose, of course, a logistical challenge to venues, a clear majority of audiences are basically fine with vaccine passports or proof of a negative test as a requirement of entry. Looking at the bottom two rows, so those audiences who haven't yet returned, we can see that 3/4 or just shy of 3/4 say that knowing that everyone has to present a passport or a negative test result would make them more likely to book. So we think it helps significantly that Northern Ireland is taking a consistent approach to this, avoiding a patchwork of venues doing their own thing. Moving on to masks and mask wearing. Most people tend to agree that mask wearing at all times would make them more likely to book. And across the board, the red bars are a bit bigger here, those who would be less likely. There's a clear minority who aren't a fan of masks. I'm sure many of you will have encountered them. But bear in mind that 4 or 5 of these rows have returned to something or already plan to return to culture despite the mask mandate. So although there's a bit of reluctance there, they have actually been booking. So the headline is that venues should feel confident in enthusiastically supporting COVID status certification and mask wearing throughout, of course, subject to those audiences who are genuinely exempt. We do think that it will aid your recovery. And I'm going to hand over to Flo now to talk through what we've been seeing from some of those audiences who are attending and are coming back.
Yeah, so we thought it would be a useful comparison to bring in some data that we've been collecting through our experience survey. So this is a rolling survey being used by organisations across the UK, sent out to audiences after they've attended an in-person event. And it lets us kind of have a look at how people who are returning are feeling and compare with missing audiences. I know some of you who are on the webinar today are signed up and using it, which is brilliant. But unfortunately, we haven't yet got enough responses from Northern Ireland to show you just that data set. But hopefully we will in future webinars if lots of you sign up, please. So today we're just going to look at some of the top level UK-wide results from the same 6-week period as missing audiences so we can compare. So there were just under 6,500 respondents during that time. So we've got some lovely data dials. So I'm just going to explain how these work. They're on a scale of -10 to +10 with 0 in the middle. And that scale ranges from very anxious to brilliant in some cases, or from strongly disagree to strongly agree in others. So I'll show you that as we go along. So the first thing to say is really that among those people who are returning, there are very high levels of confidence. We asked how they felt immediately after their visit. and the average score came in at 6 on that -10 to +10 scale. So remember that it can go negative. So the fact that this is in the green is very positive, and equates to 55% of people saying they felt brilliant immediately after the visit, and a good chunk, I think it was about 40%, saying they felt fairly happy as well. So I think really this shows what a good job organisations are doing of welcoming people back. We can also see that the act of attending is actually building confidence. So here's the dial from the previous slide, which was post-visit, how did they feel after they attended? And if I just bring in here, comparing that to the pre-visit, how are you feeling about your upcoming visit? You can see that score's a little lower at 3.5. So actually there's a kind of a thing that we're seeing of people being slightly anxious before attending and much more confident afterwards. And this is particularly true for people who are making their first visit back. So really enforcing that it is crucial to get people through the door for the first time, just to build their confidence. For the most part, audiences are very happy to be back. We asked them to say how far they agreed with a number of statements. This one was, there was a great atmosphere, and the score comes out strongly at 6.5, which is 87% of people agreeing or strongly agreeing that there was a great atmosphere at the venue. And interestingly, this is the same at both socially distanced and non-socially distanced events. We asked them to say how far they agree with the statement, this visit has made me more likely to come to other cultural events. And there's a strong level of agreement here too, with nearly 3/4 saying they agree or strongly agree with this. So you can see again, just how important it is to get people through the door for their first visit back, making them, building their confidence and making them more likely to come back to other events as well. Audiences generally have felt pretty confident in the measures organisations have put in place to keep them safe. So we asked them again to say how far they agreed with the statement. I felt confident the venue had measures in place to keep me safe, and 71% agreed or strongly agreed. You can see that coming out as a 4 on the -10 to +10 scale. Continuing to think about safety measures for a moment and picking up on what Robin was talking about, we asked the same set of questions in the experience survey as we did in missing audiences about whether certain measures would make them more or less likely to attend. So we can compare how those actually returning feel about safety measures, as we know that many organisations were quite concerned that too stringent measures may be off-putting for those people who are actually attending. But again, this very much aligns with what Robin was saying. Even amongst those attending, proof of vaccination and masks is making most people more likely to attend, and very small numbers less likely, whereas no masks and all restrictions removed is making the majority of people less likely to attend and small numbers more likely. So a quick overview on that. In summary, we've got high levels of confidence among the people returning and a great atmosphere at cultural events, a boost in confidence after returning and increased likeliness to reattend, and high levels of confidence in the venue safety measures, which they're keen to see remain in place. So now, having looked at that data and the data from missing audiences, I'm going to hand over to Katy to talk through what we think you can do about all this.
Thank you. So, okay, so back to thinking about the audiences that haven't been back. Here's the stark truth that I just want you to realise, that, you know, the audiences, even the ones who have been back, 2/5 of them say they're going to come less often. Half of them, over half of them, haven't returned to anything, and 3 out of 5 of them are waiting. So what can we do about this? Now, we went back through all of our research that we've done over the past 16 months to see if we could find any clues in that, and basically came up with 5 reassurances that audiences seem to be looking for, which I'm going to very, very quickly run through now because I want to leave some time for questions and stuff at the end. We will be circulating these slides, so if I whiz through them really fast, you can look at them in more detail later. But basically what we came across was the fact that there are 5. It's not just the health and safety, the COVID measures that people need reassurance on. There's 4 others as well. So first of all, obviously, health and safety, really important. Robin's been through all of that. Limited capacities, vaccines, masks, all of that, they're more likely to attend. So if you've got that in place, make sure it's right up there in your messaging. Here's some lovely examples. So Waterfront Hall, right up there, really upfront with what they're doing, that we're good to go, really good. So that's all fantastic. Then we've got another lovely example from the Ulster Museum, children actually smiling, putting hand sanitizer on. So, you know, we don't want angst videos and angst pictures of people sort of suffering. We want people going, you know, this is now normal, and the kids are even happy. So that's fine. One of the biggest fears that visitors have is that, you know, actually the ability for venues to enforce those standards amongst other people, and they're really worried about how other people are going to behave. So anything you can do to show people that you are trying to enforce the rules, it would be really helpful. Okay, so second reassurance is around access, not just disabled access, but also physical access to the building. But disabled audiences in particular are much less likely to reattend during COVID. And these are their key concerns, is toilets, priority access if you're managing queues, you know, will they be shoved at the back and have to stand when they have access difficulties, and confidence, particularly if you're doing socially distanced seating, that the disabled seating will still be available. Here's an example from the MAC in Belfast, who have done a lovely walkthrough video so that people know exactly what to expect in terms of how the building will be when they enter. The third one is financial reassurance, and I realise that this isn't always in your gift to be in control of this, but it's worth noting that audiences say they're more likely to book if they could have a refund if they couldn't attend because of COVID, or an exchange if they couldn't attend. And by exchange, we also mean kind of credit note that they could use on something else. So if your promoters that are coming to your venues are just refusing to let you do that, it's worth pointing out that you're just going to be really low on people making advance bookings. If they want to reassure them, they need these financial reassurances in place. This example from the Lyric is great. So offering flexibility around the refunds and the credit and the exchanges. So that's really good. They will exchange or give you a credit. The fourth one is around social reassurance. So perhaps less obvious, but you know, are you going to be able to have fun? Can you still have fun with your friends when you attend? Can we visit safely together? If I'm coming with other people, can we sit together? Can we have a drink in the cafe? Do we have to book a table? Do we need to download an app? For a lot of people, actually, the social side of it is of equal importance to what is on the stage, if not, with younger groups in particular, more important than what's on the stage. So giving them some reassurance that actually all of this is going to be fine and how to do it safely is really important. And I think one of the things that we've seen a few organisations doing is bigging up the power of seeing other people return. So a significant proportion of those who haven't yet booked want to wait until venues have been open for a few more months or until COVID risk has gone. But if they can see images of audiences actually enjoying a safe experience and quotes from customers, then that might help reassure them. So we have a lovely example here from the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, who have put some pictures of people, even people wearing masks, enjoying themselves. And some older people there is really important, enjoying a nice cup of tea. So they've got the refreshments in there, people in the auditorium, and some nice quotes from audiences. And then the final reassurance is about brand. So will it still feel like the same organisation that I'm used to? Have you sanitised it within an inch of its life so that I won't feel welcome anymore? Will it feel familiar? And interestingly, we did some focus groups with audiences, and they talked about the moment of arrival being their biggest point of anxiety. So making sure that you've got people on the door with, if they're wearing masks, maybe a badge saying, can I help or talk to me? Because people aren't sure whether everything will be different, which way to go, all that kind of stuff. Really like this example from the Crescent. They've brought their brand into their messaging. It's really fun and welcoming. So use your brand personality to get some of these messages across. So I've whizzed through that, but finally, I just want to talk about the future. because that's all well and good. I'm sure you're all very focused on getting people back over the Christmas period safely, but I think we need to start conversations about what happens beyond that. So, you know, the same audiences are not going to be there in the same numbers that they have been before. Even people that are coming back are going to come less frequently. A substantial proportion say they're probably waiting for Godot. Some of these people will not come back. So we need to think about what we can do and what the longer term picture is. So I suppose the question with existing audiences is, can we entice them back with all those health and safety measures and the reassurances we've talked about, or programming as Robin identified? Do we need to make any adaptations to our formats to be able to enable them to come back? So things like moving digitally, moving outdoors, it may be actually changing the format of what's on offer that might be the thing that enables them to come back, and particularly looking at excluded audiences, disabled audiences, much less likely to come back in the same format as it was before. But I think we also then need to think about different audiences. And a number of people have said to me, okay, so if the same old audiences aren't going to come back anymore, then we obviously just need to get lots of young people to come. And I think it's very telling that the sample that we've got in our surveys is very much an older audience skew. We haven't made it that way. We've done this research with hundreds of organisations over the last 16 months. We've got over 500,000 responses, and they skew old. This is the theatre going audience. These are the people, and it isn't just that old people fill in surveys. I've heard that till I'm blue in the face. It's not just that. There are young people filling in these surveys. It's just they're not there in the same numbers in audiences. So if we're thinking somehow that because the older people or the existing audiences have gone away and aren't coming back again, all we need to do is offer the same old stuff, but try and get young people to come, it's not going to work because they weren't coming before. So we then have to think about, okay, so who are the audiences that are underrepresented in our audiences at the moment? Who are those people? What do we need to change fundamentally to get those people to come? Because just programming the same stuff and telling the marketing department to go and find younger people, I would argue, is not the answer. So, and there's no magic bullet here. I'm not going to go and here's what to do about it, guys. There is no easy answer to this, but we need to start that conversation, because it's going to take time to shift what we do, to change what we do, to go and find these people, to persuade them that the organisations that previously weren't that interested in them, oh, we're now all over you. So we need to start that conversation now, and I would encourage you to do so. And we're all going to have to help each other on this, because you can't do this on your own. So I'll stop my rant now. Over to Flo.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to say that for those people who took part in the research, we'll have these slides available, but there is also a full report available for you and anyone else who's interested, but particularly for those people who took part, it's broken down in the same way as the two links you had, so you'll be able to compare your results with the benchmark set from Northern Ireland, and that is available from the Thrive website, and the team will also be sending it out afterwards. You can sign up as well to take part in Missing Audiences Wave 2, which is going to be taking place in January, February 22, and we'll be able to compare the results from this first wave with the second wave, which is going to be really useful to see what kind of movement there's been over those 4 months. You can register now to use the experience surveys. So if you have just reopened recently, or if you'd like to have a bit more feedback from your audiences of what they think about the experience, this is the perfect survey for you. It's designed to capture audience and visitor sentiment after attending, and will give you some of those lovely dials that I was showing you earlier. And it would be fantastic to get more people using these, so we can give you a Northern Ireland benchmark data set. And finally, I think we're into the Q&A. So please, I know we've had lots of comments and chat going on, but if you have any particular questions, please put them in the chat now, and we will answer them.
Just to get us started, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. one of the things we noticed when reading through some of the more expanded responses, and it's just something to pull out, is that there was a very vocal minority who had a very strong opinion about restrictions. So in terms of the loudness of the voice, they were heard very strongly, but when you actually looked at the numbers, they were a minority. So it was more just a point that organisations need to think about how you're going to handle the vocal minority who will be very cross that you have restrictions. There were some people saying that they weren't going back with the organisation had restrictions. So I think we have to take it into account. We've all come across them. But in terms of your staff, your front of house staff, your box office staff, what are they being? How are you supporting them to deal with those folks? I'm sure you have had vocal minorities, Farida.
I think one of the things,
sorry, go on, Katy, go on.
I was just going to ask you, Robin, to give us your experience of two different theatres with the mask wearing, because I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, well, so absolutely can share experience just a few weeks ago of two theatre productions, two shows targeted at two very similar audiences in the same town, exactly a week apart. One theatre that had really tried to kind of dial down the COVID messaging. It was there, but it wasn't really prominent, with very, very little mask wearing. And then just a week later, a completely packed crowd in a different theatre, almost all wearing masks with much more visible communications touch points throughout. You know, it was on every page of the website as a banner on the top. It was on the confirmation email. When I arrived, the ushers had a box of masks next to them and told me, just very non-confrontationally, very calmly, it's a requirement of admission that you wear your mask at all times while you're inside. Just to remind you, you need to wear your mask. And then at the start of the show, really, really interesting in terms of kind of nudge, the ushers walked up and down the side aisles of each level of the theatre, just holding a sign with a mask on. And it was really interesting to see at that point some of the people who were not wearing masks just put their mask on. So I think what we've seen as well from other kind of sectors and territories is particularly for the minority who are, very anti-mask wearing. So it's really, really important to the confidence of the other people, as we've seen in the data, that you are seen to be attempting to enforce these things. And so, the approach that I would be taking as a former venue director is to just calmly restate what the venue's policy is, but then maybe to have something to hand the customer, but then to just disengage. You don't want your ushers and your front of house staff getting into a really long fight with someone who you are not going to persuade to put on a mask. They would be much better engaging with other customers, selling, all of those things. So, in the moment, in the foyer is not the place to try and persuade an ardent anti-mask wearer to put a mask on. But we've certainly seen in places like Australia, for example, where some of the leading venues have allocations of seats that they reserve so that they can move customers to. So if you've got somebody who's absolutely flatly refusing to move a mask, the people you need to check on, people refusing to wear a mask, the people you need to check on are the people around that person. Do they want to move to somewhere else? And you need to maintain enough capacity to facilitate that. So there is no silver bullet, but generally that seems to be the best approach.
And I suppose if I'm going to ask our participants some questions, or a question. When you look at what was going to motivate people and what the important things were, it's as well as the program, so what's on. It was also simple things like the date and time of the event. So I'm just wondering, are we all so focused on our COVID stuff, or what our regulations are and how we're communicating it, that we're not thinking about the factors that are maybe more about the audience, so what they want to see and when it suits them to see it? So is anybody actually doing research with audiences at the minute about what would tempt them back?
So I dive in on that one. Just we have done, I'll talk generally about a number of specific projects that we've done over the last 12 to 18 months in multiple countries. So we have a form of research that we undertake called conjoint analysis, where we model the decisions that people are going to take and what influences those decisions. For a number of organizations, we kind of model digital versus in-person, time of day, type of art form, artist, etc. And what we've seen come through consistently, as indeed does come through in the research that the Alliance has done, is a strong preference for familiarity in terms of art form or in terms of performer. So where, for example, with dance companies, the choice has been, would you like to see, an artist from another country, another market? Actually, they want to see the local company or they want to see their local band. So it's not just the title. They're really keen on familiarity. But the other thing is where organizations have been looking to, for example, remove intervals and perform and remove intervals, reduce capacity and perform twice in one night. Generally, we've seen where we've tested it, audiences, if you're moving, say, a 7:30 start time to 6 p.m., there's a fair bit of willingness to that. So you can have your first start time at 6 p.m. When it comes to the second start time, the second we start to push beyond 8 p.m., that kind of in general terms, that demand really starts to drop off. So the key message is actually that kind of familiarity point. And we would only be moving the performance time, for example, if we were repeating the performance, or if we were alert to changes in the wider public transport system, for example, if we know that buses are stopping running early and so on, and that a lot of the audience arrive by that method, then we'd look to move performances. But there's a kind of, for evening performances, there's a 6 to 8 p.m. tolerance window.
Yes, one thing that I'd say on that, picking up on our point as well about that, just getting people through the door for that one time being very important. We've seen that I think some organizations who are launching full seasons aren't seeing the kind of uptake in season ticket bookings that they used to. So it's kind of people aren't willing to commit to that full 8 concerts or whatever that they used to attend. So I think that possibly thinking about the way we've kind of split the segments and that kind of thing, your CRM strategy and your targeting is really the most important thing. It's about thinking about what people used to go to, so that sort of familiarity, and targeting them in different ways with really clear communications, just driving them back for that one first visit. And then that's what's going to kind of get them through the door, back into the habit of booking and back into the habit of attending.
And if I may chip in one more thing, actually, thank you, Flo. That's absolutely accurate. And the another thing, just from some clients we've been working with, thinking about the digital side is, yes, like has been mentioned in the chat, and as Chris has covered, we've seen digital demand drop off, where people are switching from one mode of watching a performance to another mode. So I'm only interested in watching shows. So as soon as in-person comes available, I stop watching digital. A number of the organizations that we've worked with that are having ongoing success are the organizations that are offering digital classes. They're pivoting to the kind of exercise markets, the health and well-being market. So it might be exercise classes or art classes or whatever. And actually there does seem to be a kind of ongoing persistent market for those. So it's not just a question of digital versus in person, but it's the nature of the activity that is being offered online as well.
I was going to pick up on that because there's been quite a bit in the chat about things. At this point, I would go so far as to say, for the majority of arts organisations, trying to digitise what's happening on your stage and live streaming that or making it available on demand is a really bad idea if you want it to be economically sustainable. Just stop it. There are some that will be able to make this stand up, but it's a very small minority. By all means, do it as some kind of community engagement exercise. That's fine. If you can get distribution sorted out, where you're working with a large number of partners, where you've got literally dozens of people selling tickets for the same thing, great. But I think what is a smarter move for many is, as Robin was saying, and looking at some of the other business models that exist around there, around supporting niche communities, around educational offers, classes, things that are based on subscription rather than selling tickets for things on a one-off basis, things where you can collaborate with other people and have a platform that various people that can prop up an offer from several organisations or artists. I think there's so much more to be done in that area than there is trying to do the difficult thing of selling one-off tickets for live stream shows.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. Just stop it. Just stop doing that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's what we've been banging on about in Thrive for the last few years, is that your online audiences need an audience development strategy in the same way that your live audiences do. It's not the same program, it's not the same tactics, it's not the same relationship. So in terms of your interventions, they have to be different as well.
And also there isn't a live audience and a digital audience in most cases. They're the same, they can be the same people who perhaps want to deepen their engagement through a digital experience, having been, I mean, we've been working with a gallery that has digitized the exhibition, and actually it's the people who visited the exhibition in person that are getting the most out of it. Perhaps, you know, somebody pushed past them at the time they wanted to look at that particular object, and so they can go back into the digital version and explore it and actually go inside the object. And you know, school teachers, you can just imagine they take troop kids around a gallery, and then somebody needs a wee and they miss half of it, and then it's really busy, whereas they then go back to the classroom, and if they've got that resource to then, you know, talk about what they visited and what they saw, it's thinking of it in tandem rather than a one or the other. Now, I know we can't all afford to digitize everything that we do and have that enhanced experience, especially if people aren't paying for it, but I think it's worth starting to think about what part does digital play in a wider, you know, wider thoughts about how we engage with audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose everything we're saying and sort of when I looked at the research for the first time, it was like, oh my God, head in the hands, sort of, it's not painting a rosy picture, but without being too Pollyanna about it. It's an opportunity to do something entirely different, to actually crack audience development as we move into the future, rather than just keeping doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last number of years.
Yeah,
absolutely. Forgive me, I wonder whether I could just re-engage on, there's an ongoing discussion in the chat about mask wearing. It'd be great just to swing back to before we finish, if that's all right. Because the point is being raised about people who are drinking and using the drink as a reason to keep the mask off. Just to swing back to the anecdote about the theatre that's doing this really well that I experienced a couple of weeks ago. It was particularly that point that although it made me cringe slightly when it happened, actually seeing the ushers a minute before the performance is due to start parade up and down the aisles with an icon of a mask on a sign. That was what that fixed, was the people who had taken a drink in, had actually finished it before the performance started, crucially, and had then just kind of forgotten to put their mask back on. So I haven't seen many organizations do it, and I think it does actually work really well. Pardon me for just trying to squeeze that in.
Okay, sorry. I think that's it. It's 3 p.m, so I'm aware of the time. I don't think we have any more questions, so maybe we'll wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Flo, Katy, Robin, and Chris, for doing the webinar today. And I think that's it. You can download the report from Thrive's website, and there's also a link to sign up to the next wave that will be in January, right? It starts then. And that's it. If you have any questions, you can email me, communications@wewillthrive.co.uk, or Fiona, CEO, @wewillthrive.co.uk. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. Bye.
Yeah.